Hey friends. So in this first tutorial on how to optimize Photoshop for better processing, quicker processing, we're going to talk about mainly RAM and programs that are running in the background that we need to get rid of, and some things to do before we actually open Photoshop. And then we're going to talk about a bug that's in Photoshop that will affect you if you open and close many documents, or if you do batch processing. To get started, we're going to look at Taskmaster. So we go to the Windows taskbar and we type in Taskmaster. This is going to give us a readout on our memory usage right now. So right now, without me starting Photoshop, I'm at 42% of my memory being used. So that leaves me 58%. This would be a terrible time for me just to start, because almost half of my memory is already being used. What happens is generally during the day, I've been browsing the internet, I've been looking at cat videos, and I'm finally sick of that. And I think, well, maybe I should edit some of these images that's been laying around. The first thing I need to do is close down some of the programs that are running in the background so I can have the maximum RAM to run Photoshop efficiently. So you see that in the memory here, it's listed from the most used to the least. Chrome is a huge memory hog. It's using almost 6 gig of my memory right now. That's because I've got, a gajillion tabs open, because I don't like bookmarking things. I'm terrible about that. To get rid of this right here, all I'm going to do is open up Chrome and just close it by hitting the X. There we went down to 23%. We gained a bunch of memory just getting rid of that. And you may have other memory hogs that are running in the background as well. It will vary from user to user, of course. Now, Bridge I want to keep open because I use that with Photoshop. Camtasia I need to keep open because it is the program that's making this recording. Nord is my VPN, and you can see this other stuff. Now, these are all the programs on the left-hand side that are running at this time. And it's also services as well. So you see like Malbyte services and some of this. So that's like my virus scanner. But a lot of times when it says services, it means that it's support files running for different programs. So, or your peripherals. So it's either support files for the operating system or support files for your mouse, external drives, microphones, cameras, whatever you've got hooked up. If your number is not down in the 20s, then I would suggest start closing down some of these other programs that you know that they are and that you know that you don't need them to be running. Now, a couple things like iTunes, I keep it running because I always listen to music whenever I edit. Now let's see what happens when we open up Photoshop. This is Photoshop's large document format, which is PSB. So what happens is when a document gets over 2 gigabytes, then the PSD format can't handle it. So it saves in the you have the option to save it as a TIFF or a PSB file. We've opened this up and we're at 42%, which isn't bad. But you got to remember that every time that I start mark making here or making changes, then this is going to go up because it's got to save these undos. The default for the undos is 50 undo states. So you can undo 50 marks or changes that you make, which seems a little excessive. And we'll talk about that later in another video about how to optimize those settings. But the main thing to remember here is that any mark you make is going to be recorded as an undo state and add to this memory. Now, any other files that you open, support files or whatever, lens flares or whatever that you're going to put in here, those files will take up memory as well. So I'm going to open up another document because it's very rare that I'd have less than 2 documents open at the same time, because I share resources from one document to the other quite often. Once I figured out the edit on one set, how I want to edit it on one document, then I might drag and drop the light leaks or whatever assets that I have used over to the other document. That way I don't have to reinvent the wheel each time that I do a new image. Now we've got the two images open and we're at 54% of memory, which is pretty good, but we haven't made any marks yet or made any changes. So this is going to definitely go up. Now the goal here is to stay below 100%. Once you get to 100%, then it starts writing things to disk. When you start writing to the disk, because you've run out of memory, then that's when things start getting really slow, because the disk is vastly slower than random access memory, your RAM. So if you don't know what this means, basically, think of RAM as being your brain, where you can access data almost immediately, unless you're like 250 years old like me, and it takes me 2.5 days to remember my own middle fucking name. But you know, for the most part, you can recall data fairly quickly. Now, imagine if you've got to run down to the library, look it up in a book, and then retrieve that data. Well, that's like going to the disk and getting it. And so because the disk is vastly slower than memory, that's why things start slowing down a lot. One way you can tell if you're at 100% without having Taskmaster open here, which takes up memory itself, is by setting in any document, you can hit this drop down and change it to efficiency. Now, anytime that this gets below 90 or so, that's telling you that it is writing to disk. So, and that you've used up all your RAM. So you either need to close some documents that you have open, you need to close some background programs, you might need to purge your cache. There's a number of things you can do, and we'll talk about some of those other things later. But think about background programs right now, things that do not need to be running that are running. Now, here's the bug that I promised to show you. So you notice that we're at 9 gig, almost 10 gig here, and 54% of the memory is being used. So when I close these two, look what happens. It didn't free up the memory from those two images, it kept it. So what that means is every time that you open a new image, don't judge me, not all these are done. We'll open up a couple more images here. So every time that you open up new images and close them and it doesn't release that memory, you're eventually going to run out of RAM. And it may be, you know, anywhere between 2 and 10 documents and you're out of RAM, depending on, you know, how much RAM that you've got. So we've got these other two documents open and now we're at 64% memory being used. We'll close those two. We're still at 64%. So you can see, especially if you're at 16 gig instead of 32, how this is going to get filled up fairly quickly. I'm going to conclude the tutorial right there. Mainly, the idea is getting rid of things that are running in the background and also making sure that you're not running below 95% efficiency and showing you how to check on that. So I hope this tutorial helps. All right, thanks guys.